personnel. And I'm wondering why the President of the United States, our Commander-in-Chief, said that he was shocked that Iran would retaliate by striking other countries in the region. This was not just foreseeable, it was foreseen. It was, you don't need to get into a skiff to understand that their likely play was to asymmetrically retaliate and then to close the strait. And then it happened, and then the president said, gosh, who could have seen this coming? I'm just trying to figure out, for those of us on the left and the right who are wary of regime change wars, who are wary of happy talk, who have learned through terrible experience the cost of this kind of adventure.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Chairman. Secretary General, thank you for being here. Secretary, I want you to provide some reassurance for my constituents. In 2019, the DIA published that Iran, quote, had swarms of small boats, large inventory of naval mines, an arsenal of anti-ship missiles that can severely disrupt maritime traffic in the Strait of Hormuz. In 2025, after Operation Midnight Hammer, a Brookings expert said, quote, it is wrong to conclude Iran is now a defeated nation and will act accordingly. Iran's demonstrated destructive missile capabilities have penetrated nearly every part of Israel. Iran's arsenal could endanger American forces in the Gulf. And Senator Collins asked General Kane about the extent to which you were briefed and the president was briefed about the very likely outcome of this kinetic engagement. And there are some data points that seem to indicate that we did not see all of this coming or that we didn't account for it. We may have been briefed on it, but we didn't account for it. Parts of the THAAD and Patriot systems in South Korea were moved to the Middle East. This is after the war. After the war, munitions were moved from around the world to defend U.S. sites in the region. There was a rush to evacuate United States personnel, and Iran struck more than 200 structures and equipment at 16 U.S. sites. So, Secretary, can you just reassure us that this was all foreseen and part of the plan, or can you tell us whether there were any surprises here?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator. I can reassure you that it was all accounted for. Every aspect of this was poured over by the Joint Staff, by civilian leadership, and represented in pursuit of a very clear goal. And the chairman laid out correctly what the metrics militarily were from the beginning, whether it's ballistic missiles, Iran's Navy. You can't contest a blockade if you don't have a conventional Navy, destroying the defense industrial base. But it was all in service of ensuring Iran never has a nuclear weapon.
So as a for example.
I mean, that was, so I want you to know, it was all seen through the lens of preventing Iran from having
I understand that's the underlying objective, and I do not dispute the military success. I don't think there's any doubt that when the most powerful, most well-funded, most technologically advanced, most disciplined, most trained military in human history sets out to do something, they almost always accomplish it. And so that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just wondering why we're moving THAAD assets from South Korea after the war started. I'm just wondering why there was a scramble to evacuate personnel. And I'm wondering why the President of the United States, our Commander-in-Chief, said that he was shocked that Iran would retaliate by striking other countries in the region. This was not just foreseeable, it was foreseen. It was, you don't need to get into a skiff to understand that their likely play was to asymmetrically retaliate and then to close the strait. And then it happened, and then the president said, gosh, who could have seen this coming? I'm just trying to figure out, for those of us on the left and the right who are wary of regime change wars, who are wary of happy talk, who have learned through terrible experience the cost of this kind of adventurism. Why is this any different, and why didn't we see this coming?
I appreciate your lauding of the force up front, and earnestly, that it's the greatest fighting force on planet Earth. But that was the same fighting force that surrendered to Iranian fast boats under the Biden administration. We all remember the pictures. Remember the Americans with their hands above their head at gunpoint of the Iranians? It's because they didn't have leadership like President Trump who empowered them to do what was necessary. The Biden administration allowed them to pursue nuclear ambitions, didn't do anything about it. President Trump stepped in. We factored all the risk and ranges of options, put in maximum defensive capability for our troops as we could in real time, empowering the CENTCOM commander with everything he needed to ensure this mission could be as successful as possible, knowing there are branches and sequels of every operation that have to be accounted for.
I'm going to
factor the Navy. You might wonder, why would you sink the Navy if you're trying to prevent a nuclear Iran? There's reasons for that, because you're planning for contingencies in other ways that this could go as well.
Secretary, I'm trying to stay on time here. I hear what you're saying. I just don't hear an answer to the question of why we had to take certain actions that could have been taken before the kinetic engagement and would have kept our assets and our personnel more safe and would have looked and actually been more planful, more thoughtful, more well executed. Why are we doing all of this stuff as if it's a scramble if all of this stuff was foreseen?
I think I'm quite confident, along with the CENTCOM commanders, that we took every action possible to ensure that we were prepared for this conflict.
Thank you.
America launched a military operation against Iran, and now a senator is asking the question that everyone in Washington is tiptoeing around. Was any of this actually planned, or were we making it up as we went? The senator opened with hard facts. Back in 2019, the Defense Intelligence Agency published a clear assessment. Iran had swarms of small boats, a large inventory of naval mines, and an arsenal of anti-ship missiles capable of severely disrupting traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. After the American strikes in Operation Midnight Hammer, a Brookings Institution expert warned explicitly that it would be wrong to conclude Iran was a defeated nation. Iran's missile capabilities had already penetrated nearly every part of Israel. Its arsenal remained a serious danger to American forces in the Gulf. None of this was secret. None of this required classified access. It was publicly known. And yet, after the war started, parts of the THAAD and Patriot missile defense systems stationed in South Korea were rushed to the Middle East. Munitions were scrambled from around the world to defend American sites in the region. Personnel were evacuated in what the senator described as a rush. Iran struck more than 200 structures and pieces of equipment across 16 American sites. And then the President of the United States publicly expressed shock that Iran would retaliate by striking other countries in the region. The senator's question to Secretary Hegseth was direct and simple. Was all of this foreseen and part of the plan, or were there surprises? Hegseth insisted everything was accounted for, that every aspect had been carefully considered by the Joint Staff and civilian leadership, all in service of the overriding goal of preventing Iran from ever obtaining a nuclear weapon. The senator pushed back firmly. He said he was not disputing the military capability of the American armed forces. When the most powerful, best-funded, most technologically advanced military in human history sets out to accomplish something, it almost always does. That was not the question. The question was why THAAD assets were being moved from South Korea after the war had already started, why there was a scramble to evacuate personnel, and why the commander-in-chief expressed surprise at an outcome that did not require classified intelligence to predict. Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz and asymmetrically retaliating against American allies in the region was not just foreseeable. It had been foreseen, publicly, by experts and analysts for years. The senator said he was speaking for people across the political spectrum who have lived through the consequences of military adventurism before. People who have learned through painful experience what happens when happy talk replaces honest planning. His core concern was not whether the strikes succeeded militarily. It was whether the full range of consequences had genuinely been thought through before the first bomb fell, or whether critical defensive preparations were only made after the shooting started, when they should have been in place long before. Hegseth maintained that every risk and contingency had been factored in. The senator closed by saying he simply did not hear an answer to his question, and that silence, he implied, was an answer of its own.